Nigeria's gross domestic product experienced a year-on-year growth of 3.19% in real terms during the second quarter of 2024. The GDP growth rate surpasses the 2.51% recorded in the second quarter of 2023 and the 2.98% growth seen in the first quarter of 2024. The GDP performance in quarter two of 2024 was primarily driven by the services sector, which grew by 3.79% and contributed 58.76% to the total GDP. The agriculture sector saw a growth of 1.41%, slightly down from the 1.50% growth recorded in quarter two of 2023. The industry sector improved significantly with a growth of 3.53% compared to the negative 1.94% decline that was observed in the second quarter of 2023. Well, joining us now to discuss Nigeria's GDP growth for the second quarter of 2024, as reported by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, is economist Gbolahan Olojede. Good to have you on Newsday. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you join us. Now, these figures look good on paper. We know that there have been predictions even before now that we were going to see some form of growth when it comes to the GDP. But coming from what we see on paper, is this reflective of the current state of the average Nigerian? That's the first question. Now, the second question is some analysts have said that this could have been as a result of some of the policies that the Tinubu administration have put in place when they came into office. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Okay, you can have growth that is not inclusive. So the fact that we said, oh, there is growth, does not mean it's a growth that permeated the entire chain. So growth could occur in certain stratum without coming down all the way. So that could be what we have. So you have a disconnect between the macro and the micro level of that kind of a growth. It has persistently been a problem with our growth trajectory, where, I don't know if you remember, there was a time about 10 years ago when the president had gone for an event in Kenya and said, oh, see all the jets. I think we came with about 7 private jets to that event. So it was meant to be reflective of the fact that, oh, we are doing so well. But while the president was of that opinion, his Minister of Finance was already grappling with non-inclusive growth. So people at certain level were growing. The other people below that ladder were not growing. So we need to do more in the space of connecting the macro to the micro and ensuring that whatever gains are happening in certain sectors or in certain levels, at certain levels can dovetail and permeate through down the ladder.
You've not answered the second question, the policies.
The policies. There are certain policies that are, that have been there, but most of those policies, the real benefits are not yet here for the most part. Should we have multiple exchange rates? I don't think so. I think we need to have a single exchange rate. Was it done? Was it properly timed? I don't think so. Will it benefit us in the long run? Yes, if we do certain things, it will benefit us. Are the benefits here now? I don't think so.
So you don't think there's a connect between what we're seeing now and the policies?
I don't think so. I also look at certain things like, for example, in the second quarter, the oil price was better than it was in the first quarter. It could have been something we benefited from, because when you look at the breakdown, you see element of what constituted those growth, like the services and all of that. So, but the disconnect is still there. 10 years ago, it was there. Today, it is even more so. So the ordinary person on the street, you say the economy has grown, is wondering exactly, what is she saying?
No more? One more?
No, I was.
Okay, did it surprise you? First of all, and how do you explain this to the average Nigerian that, okay, there are all these numbers that are being thrown, and just like you said, it isn't trickling down. How do you explain the growth, but no growth in the pockets?
Yeah, it's difficult to explain to the ordinary citizen. But there's also a part of what we measure that I think, You see all this GDP, they are good, and it is a standard. You want to compare one nation to the other. Everybody is measuring GDP, so you have to measure your own GDP. But I think we need to go further. We need to go beyond what do they do internationally and decide for ourselves. What exactly do we seek to measure, and how do we want to measure it? Otherwise, we will continue to have this gap. If what the government wants to measure is just this traditional GDP. Yeah, when the GDP is good, then we say everything is good. But I can decide to measure some other things, which will tell me some deeper stories that the GDP cannot tell. And we need to shift a little bit in those directions and measure those things. Even the inflation, when we measure inflation, we need to begin to ask ourselves if that bucket should remain as it was, or if the weight associated with each of the elements in that bucket should remain as it has been. Or we need to change it. Because people will argue that if you say 38% or 39% inflation, they think it's more.
I think it's a bit conservative.
It's not
compared to
what they feel is not 40%.
Yes, but let's look at some of the sectors. You also alluded to the fact that the service sector contributed largely. That's like the star performer when you look at the contributions to this increase in GDP. But what would you consider the most driving force of this service sector? And what should we do to increase or boost that sector?
Our services, the telecoms, the banking, all those are the heart of our services. Because most of them are what you call, things that we must consume on a daily basis. People will still need to do their airtime, they will still need to do their data, people will still need banking services, So those things will be there. We need to see how we can improve their environment. I know, for example, that the telecoms have been, having all sort of complaints. And when you go and look at the taxes that those telcos pay, you don't want them to be running losses like some of them are currently running. Because if they're running losses, we are also losing as a nation. Those taxes, those corporate income taxes, will not come as they used to come. So, looking at how we can support their businesses to do better. And then the manufacturing, which is the crying baby of all of this, needs even more support. Because what we have been seeing is a decline in the performance. And the decline is obvious when you see the importation component of our manufacturing sector and what has been going on around the issue of FX supply and the cost, the exchange rate in itself. So those ones even need to be babied more. We need to pay attention to them to get more productive. It is at the core of even fixing the exchange rate problem that we have at hand. We must produce more, have more to offer to the world. And the more we offer to the world, we can earn Forex and stabilize.
I know, you were talking about the telecommunications sector, and I know that we're talking about increase in tariff recently, saying that if the government doesn't do the needful, that they might begin to run at a loss. If sectors like that are not being, boosted and the needful is not being done by the government of the day, what would become of the GDP? Because it looks like it's the non-oil sector that is boosting the GDP, as we see.
I know it's a tightrope to walk. So on one side, you want to support their tariff campaign. On the other side, you're trying to weigh how would that tariff campaign affect the citizens that are already burdened and the users of their services. So it's a delicate rope to walk on. But at the same time, we can find that balance. It is important that those, in fact, the telcos are called economic infrastructure. It's an infrastructure, but it's so fundamental to the survival of the system, even including the banking system, that you must ensure that they stay afloat. So there must be a way to make them midway, where they don't get to fleece the citizens, and at the same time, they get a little bit of tariff support.
All right, let's also look at the agricultural sector. We saw the agricultural sector growing, of course, from a slight dip from last year. Last year was 1.5%, and then it dipped to 1.4% this quarter, this last quarter result that we're looking at. And of course, looking at the fact that we've been talking about diversification into agriculture, we expect that with all of the mouthing that the government of the day has been doing when it comes to looking into agriculture, investing in agriculture, the president during his speech during the End Bad Governance protest said that he was going to give out farm inputs, to farmers, fertilizers and all. And we expect that there should be some form of growth. But from 1.5 to 1.4, although when you compare in terms of quarters, it may have increased, but yearly there's a dip. What do you think could have been done better?
There's a lot that could be done with agriculture. Incidentally, my point has always been that if you fix food problem, you will fix a whole lot of the problem that we're talking about. Because food inflation is glaring when you look at the graph. It speaks to you that food is a major driver of the headline inflation that we have. So issues around insecurity in some farming areas, I learned that government is paying special attention to that now, especially in some of those states. Issues of farm inputs. So the seedlings, the fertilizers, even the extension services, people who can go in there and educate the farmers on what to do as far as best farming practices is concerned. Because one of the problems even in agriculture is the yield problem. So you take 1 hectare of land in Nigeria and someone plants maize and he gets 2 tons per hectare. I'm just using an arbitrary number now. And you go to South Africa on the same 1 hectare and the guy is doing 4. So you're asking yourself, it's the same 1 hectare of land. It's the same product. Why is the man in Nigeria getting 2 and the one in South Africa is getting 4? So we need to look into all of those yield issues.
There's also the issue of insecurity. The farmers that are no longer going to their farms.
You see, even the insecurity part, why we must fix insecurity, especially in those heavy farming states, the Kadunas of this world, Benues of this world. We must deal with those matters. But one thing I'm convinced of is that states like Oyo State and Kwara alone, those 2 states, let nobody farm in the remaining 34 states or thereabout. Those 2 states can feed this country.
Well, do you think this is a bragging point for the Tinubu administration?
Of course, it will take it in its stride as a bragging point. The other time it was the fact that inflation has seemed to have inflected, so the curve has changed. It's a plus. It could also be a sign, early signs of certain changes. But how sustained those things are is also very important. You don't want to have a positive now, and then in another few months, the story has changed. The sustainability is important.
But do you think that this GDP growth can be sustained? Are we doing the right thing? Are we on the growth trajectory path?
It depends on what we do and what we do consistently. If we continue to do the right things, it will be sustained. If we don't, it will go back. I'm afraid already for the August inflation numbers, for example, and that is because of the fuel issue. So in July, we had something that went down, but in August, for the better part of August, it was fuel problem all over the place. So that might even have affected the sustainability of that decline in inflation that we saw in the previous month. So we need to watch these things and ensure that we can attain a sustainable change. If inflation is going down, let us ensure we keep it down, keep falling. If GDP is growing, let's sustain that growth, and beyond the sustenance of the growth, let's get it more involved. More people get into that net that they can benefit. Not a growth that is not inclusive, is only remaining numbers, and most people are complaining.
Well, how do you think the CBN Monetary Policy Committee meeting will be addressing this GDP figures? How will they be reading it and interpreting it?
I don't foresee any major step yet. The monetary policy, you see the inflation curve that attempted to change direction in July. We need it sustained a bit. When it is sustained a bit, then you can see CBN will get more confident to want to start cutting rate. As it is right now, I don't think the CBN will feel confident enough to start to cut rates. At the best, it might keep things at the same level.
Looking at the oil sector, the growth, the trajectory increased from last year, the contribution to the GDP from the oil sector increased from the contribution last year. What would you say is responsible for that?
I think somehow we are actually getting some improvement in production, but more importantly, price is also good to us. Anything that has to do with price of oil, know that it has nothing to do with us because we don't determine the price of oil. Production is what we can work on and make a difference. So we just need to work hard on the production side of things to continue to improve our volumes so that the prices will come in bigger benefit to us if we're able to increase our volume. So essentially, I think we benefited from price, change in prices in the international oil markets.
International markets. So, well, yes, go ahead, please.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to ask what you think the policy direction should be for the government of the day, looking at all of these indices and the figures we have from the GDP.
Sustainability should be at the heart of the thinking. Then, in my observation, we have a bit more of talking than of doing. So the discipline in execution has to come into that space. You saw Dangote distributed 1 million rice, and there was no stampede. And people were talking about receiving the rice. You could see the level of that's the if sorry to say if that was government, you know what we're talking about. It's not going to be the same. So the discipline in execution is important, so that whatever is the policy that you bring out, whatever palliative or whatever, it has to be executed with the right level of discipline, so that we're not just talking. We're beginning to see the doing in the space. And when this thing is happening, it's easy to see. People will tell you that, oh, I got a better price in the market. Oh, the CNG is there. Oh, you know.
CNG, well, another big kettle of fish, but we have to wrap it up.
We do have to wrap it up. It was great having you. Thank you so much, Gbolahan Olojede, for joining us this afternoon on Newsday.
Thanks.